Let's spend some time now looking at how to actually use MongoDB in our Node.js applications. We'll do this using an NPM module called MongoDB, and let's go here and get set up with that. First, I'm going to go to a little folder I created called 01test, and in that I created a package.json file. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. All the standard stuff here, I have async because I'm going to use that for the demo, and then I'm using the MongoDB NPM module, and I'm going to use version 1.2.x, doesn't matter which one for that. So let's get this started, get the download going and getting it building everything. And let's go back here and look at a file I've got here from MongoDB. Now, before I go ahead and cover all of this, let's come down here to the blank space and talk a little bit about MongoDB terminology. You may be familiar in the sort of traditional relational database world with the terminology databases, tables, and records. Well, in MongoDB, that's slightly different. There are databases, collections, and documents. So we'll be using that terminology as we work our way through it. The other cool thing about MongoDB is all the documents and everything we work with is JavaScript, which is absolutely fantastic for us in Node.js as JavaScript is our world. So let's take a look at the format of one of these documents now. Let's, for example, write a document for an album. We'd have a name, we'll call it Italy 2012. We need to provide the unique ID. If you do not provide a unique ID, MongoDB will provide one for you, and it'll be an instance of a class called Object ID. And when you print it out, it'll be some like a long hexadecimal number or something like that. But the cool thing is we don't actually need to use their built-in IDs because, for example, for our albums, the album name itself is unique and we don't want duplicates. And there can only be one item with any given ID in a particular collection in MongoDB. So for albums, we'll just use the album name. We'll call it Mark Visits Italy, and then let's also add a description. There are lots of Italians here or something. And then finally, date. Let's say this was the 10th of May in 2012. Similarly, the schema for our picture, for our photos, will have an ID. And again, we don't need to use their built-in ID because we can use the album name and the file name for them, and that's guaranteed to be unique like that. So we can do that. We have file name, and that can be photo00, oops, it's too many zeros, 1.jpg. We can have description, mark at the Trevi Fountain or something in Rome. And then we can also have the date it was taken, and we'll say this was May 11th or something like that. So again, the document format is really quite simple and easy to work with. Okay. Let's go back here and we'll see that this is all done. And if we go to our Node modules folder, you'll see indeed we have the MongoDB. So I want to go in there and take a look around. And I want to actually look at some code that MongoDB itself requires, and that is this library called bson. And so let's go ahead and look at that. It's a binary sort of transfer protocol to communicate with the MongoDB server. And in particular, I wanted to go to the lib folder of that. And you'll see there are a bunch of different classes here. Now, the interesting thing is that MongoDB, being based on JavaScript, basically will just work exactly as you expect it. Strings and numbers and other types will just behave properly. But as we mentioned way back, I believe it was in chapter 2, JavaScript doesn't really do 64-bit integers. So if you really want to work with 64-bit integers, you need help from outside. And the Mongo people, fortunately, provided this thing called a class called long. So if you look in this here, you'll see it actually has an implementation of a long, and you basically pass it a string of a 64-bit integer, and then it has operations like addition, multiplication, and subtraction and everything. So you can still work with you have like is 0, is negative. You can still work with 64-bit integers here in JavaScript and with MongoDB. There's also support for like a binary objects. This is the object ID I was talking about, timestamps and things like that. So I will quickly here go to the web browser and show you the GitHub page for MongoDB. Has a bunch of documentation and helpful stuff here for the MongoDB native driver. And then also here, actually, there's on the MongoDB GitHub.com page, there's a bunch of great documentation here. So I do recommend finding this and sort of taking a glance through it, because it definitely has a ton of great information. So I just wanted to show you all that. And I'm still there. I'm back in my one test directory. Okay, so we work with JavaScript and everything like that. I've actually gone ahead and pre-created a bunch of documents here and stuff for pictures. Oh, I forgot to mention, that's right, the picture must also have the album it lives in or something like that. So I went ahead and created a bunch of documents and everything to describe photos, and then a bunch of documents to describe albums, and then I actually have a couple variables here which we'll take a look at in a minute. Now, to get started with MongoDB in my Node.js programs or scripts or something, I need to include a bunch of lines that I always just cut and paste because I never remember exactly what they are. But basically, you need to include a few Mongo classes, namely the database, the connection, and the server. You need to set up a host and a port, and then you need to create the database object that itself takes a server object, and you give it the host, the port, auto reconnect. And then the other cool thing is MongoDB has connection pooling automatically built in or already built in. You can sort of run multiple queries at the same time, and it'll pool them, and it'll sort of set up the connections to the server and manage those. This W1 we'll talk about later. Basically, it has to do with whether Mongo should wait to tell you the write is completed before returning from callbacks and everything. You can set it to 0, which means just don't wait, and send the database call to the server and then come back to me. That might be useful if I'm sort of writing log data to I'm just logging events, and I don't really care if I lose 1 in 1,000 or something like that. If I do care about losing data, though, I can use this W1, and then it'll sort of add some extra safety and make sure that it is waiting for things to be confirmed. The write is confirmed before it actually calls back to me. Now, let's go ahead and write some code here and actually look at creating collections now that we have a database. So we have this global variable DB, so we know we can always work with that. I'm going to create a waterfall here, and I'm going to create a couple global variables, albums and photos, to hold these things for me. So let's go async.waterfall, and then I'm going to, let's do that. And then results, and it always formats that weird. There we go. And this is the sort of results function, like that. So let's write the first function in this series, and that is going to be, let's create a collection. So db.collection, and then I'm going to call it photos. And then I'm going to give it a callback. I'm going to give it a callback, which will be the next function in the waterfall. Now that will have the photos collection and another callback. Okay. Now, there are actually two ways you can create a collection in MongoDB, and there's a couple different variations on them. You can call the function db collection, and by default, as I called it right now, it will create the collection if it does not exist, or if it does exist, it will return it to the callback here. I can optionally provide a second parameter here called true, and this changes the behavior to open the collection if it exists, otherwise throw an error saying that it does not exist. Not specifying this safe is the same as saying safe false, which means what I described before. Create it if it doesn't exist, otherwise open it. I can actually use another function here called create collection. And what this does by default is creates the collection if it doesn't exist, otherwise returns the collection. If I specify safe true to create collection, it will throw an error if it already exists. Otherwise, it will just go ahead and otherwise it'll create it. Not specifying it again is the same as saying false, and that means create it if it doesn't exist. Otherwise, just return the existing one. So since we're not very fussy, we're just most of the time going to use it like this. Just make sure the photos collection is there. If it's not, create it. Otherwise, great. We'll be very happy. So what we're going to do is we're going to say photos equals, let's actually do albums first. Let's do albums and say albums equals albums collection like that. And then let's go ahead and create the photos as well. So then I can say function photos collection, and then I can say photos equals photos collection. And now I'm ready to start actually putting some things into the collection. Now, the way I'm going to insert things into the collection is using the insert method of the collection object. So I have this collection here, this album here, I'm sorry, this document describing an album A1. So we will go ahead and insert that into the collection here. I'm going to say albums.insert, and I'm going to say A1. I'm going to say safe. Let's make this look pretty. True, and then I'm going to provide a callback. Okay, function doc and callback. Okay, now the save true says make sure you verify that it's been written to at least one database. MongoDB supports replication and everything, so you can actually have it confirm that it's written to multiple things. But here we just want to say make sure you've written to at least one database, and then the callback will return the document that was written. Otherwise, there will be an error. Okay, so we should be able to say console.log doc, console.log I successfully wrote out, and then we should see that. And actually, let's stop and take a look and see how this is going. Again, we can very quickly empty out our database if we want. All right, so let's say node Mongo. All right, great, that worked. I successfully wrote out this document, but you've noticed here that actually my program is kind of hung. It's not actually it's kind of not behaving properly. I have to Control-C to close it out. Well, basically, Mongo will keep the thing open until I run db.close, like that. And then, so let's go ahead and reset the database. We'll run it, and now you'll see it actually creates the collection, and when it's done, it closes things out, and then I'm definitely good. Okay. The other cool thing about insert is I can insert more than one thing at a time, which is quite useful. So let's insert the other two albums I created, A2 and A3. So we'll do albums.insert, A2 and A3. I've specified those as an array. And then we'll pass them to the callback. And now it should be docs. So we'll say, let's double check that that's good. Oopsie, let's actually do that. And then again, we'll do cb null. So let's give that a try and test it out. All right. It successfully wrote out one, then it successfully wrote out two more. Great. So that is how you insert things into collections. If an ID already exists, you will get an error here. So let's see if we can trigger this. If I try to insert something with an ID that already exists, I'll get an error, and the code should be 11,000, like this. So let's try to trigger that by saying albums.insert a1 again, and then we'll say safe true and cb function doc cb console.log. I hope I don't get here. I'm expecting bad things to happen. So here I'm saying if and code equals 11,000. Let's say console.log dupe key, or dupe ID, let's call it, because let's stick with consistent terminology. All right, so we insert A1, then we insert 2 and 3, then we try to insert A1 again, which should call an error, which should cause the waterfall to abort and immediately go to our sort of results function. So let's see how that works. We'll reset our database, and let's run our Mongo script again. Oh, let's actually type in code correctly. So I forgot to do that. Right. And there we go. We actually do see that I did get the duplicate ID and the error was thrown as expected. So that's the basics of working with insert. Continuing along, we can actually delete things from our collection using the remove method. For example, since I'm trying to insert A1 again here, let's actually delete it instead. So I can say albums.remove, and I want to remove the object with the ID Italy 2012. I can actually skip the safe true here if I don't care. Like, oftentimes I'm deleting things and I just want to be sure. I just, delete it, make it go away. I can actually opt to not bother waiting for it. And I can actually even skip on the callback here if I want. And oopsie, let's do that. And so what you do is you have to sort of provide a specifier to say what you want to remove. And we'll say we want to remove the thing with the ID Italy 2012 like that. And now I should be able to call CB null. And I will never get here. All right, let's hope that that works. I'll reset the database. I'll run it. Oh, no, it's not going to let me do that. Okay, it's not going to actually let me run this without a callback. So I will provide a callback, and we'll try that again. There you go. Okay, so but without providing the safe true here, it actually it's just immediately going to call the callback without verifying that it actually succeeded or not. And so sometimes I'm just like, get rid of it and let me continue on with my things. So that's removing things, which is quite nice. Let's take a look at one last function, which will be updating things. And to update something, I actually like Italy 2012, so let's not delete it here. To update something, we're going to use the method on the collection called update. I don't know if you noticed or not, but here in my third document for Toronto, I accidentally misspelt title. I accidentally spelled it tilde. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the update method to fix that. And the update method, I will do function for an insert. I do docs and CB, and then I'm going to I won't print these out anymore. I'm not that interested. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say albums.update, and I want to say update the object with the ID Toronto 2009. So with that, now I have to sort of provide an expression or something like that. So for example, I could say set the description to equal this is the new description. So let's try that, and then I say safe true, and then I'll call callback, and then it should give me the updated version of the document, and I'll say console.log updated. And let's see what happened. And then finally CB null. All right, so I'm going to, let's see if I typed that in correctly. Great, it updated it. Oh, I totally didn't do that. Look at that. So update, I forgot. The update function actually also provides some stats. So it gives you docs and stats. So this is actually a very good example, a very good lesson here. If you're working with the async waterfall, and it's suddenly, you think you're calling the callback, and it suddenly says object is not a function, that is almost certainly because the parameter list doesn't match what you thought was going to get passed to the callback. So I thought albums update was just going to pass me back an error. I just thought that it was expecting like function error, document or something. So the error, of course, gets used. The waterfall handles that for us. So I thought it would just pass the document. But in fact, the update function does error stats and document or error doc and stats. So I have to be sure to add that. Oopsie. There we go, like that. So that's actually a really good lesson. We're kind of lucky that I goofed up there too. If you're working with an async thing and you see object is not a function, every single time that's happened to me, it's because I got the parameter list wrong. So let's reset our database and run that again. Great. And you'll see that it actually did update, and it actually doesn't return the document. It just says I updated one document like that. Now, that's cool. There's the set command and everything, but there's actually a bunch of other interesting things we can do. So let's go ahead and take a look at those now. As I see here, you can set things, you can increment numeric fields. If I have a field that's an array, I can push things to the end of it. I can push an array of values to the end of an array. I can pop things. There's a bunch of different operations, but the one I'm going to play with right now is the rename, since I have that tilde instead of that title. All right, so I'm going to rename, and I want to rename the tilde field to title. And let's see if I can make this work. So let's reset our database. And let's run this bad boy again, and hopefully I got it right. There you go. So now let's go ahead. Yeah, actually, we'll just stick it at that. I'll show you how to fetch documents in the next sample, in the next section. But that's the basics of working with documents, insertion, deletion, and modification of documents within MongoDB collections. Yeah, so let's go ahead in the next section and look at how to retrieve things from the collections.